Hello and welcome to 4Colour Reactions. My name's Led Sharp and this episode's going to be all about, well, reactions, funnily enough. Mainly the attendee reaction to the announcement that Frank Miller was going to be attending Thoughtbubble, their reaction to that reaction, and the subsequent reaction to those reactions. So, I was going to have a nice piece about Karen Berger going over to Dark Horse Comics to start her own imprint, which looks like it's even more diversified than Vertigo. I'd still check it out because it looks fantastic. And I was also going to do a nice happy little moment about DC finally getting to the stands of Walmart in America. Let's hope eventually they don't ignore the UK market. But as it stands, this grew into a bit of a monster and further divided fans on both sides. UK comic book convention Thoughtbubble has recently announced that it is dropping Frank Miller from its guest list after an overwhelming negative reaction from their convention attendees. So, let's break this down a bit first. Thoughtbubble is a very successful UK non-profit convention that has run from 2007 and prides itself on its inclusivity and diversity. It has several large sponsors and even had to move to bigger premises in 2019. It's run with a love of the medium and usually the care of the comic community in mind. Frank Miller is a former legend of the comic industry. To say his work was not influential in the 80s is a disservice to his once great talent, but his star has definitely faded. His opinions are objectionable, and despite mellowing in seeming old age and ill health, he's never going to remove the tarnish he so liberally coated himself in. Now, if I was organising a convention and had the opportunity for such an industry figure as Miller to come to my convention, I would probably leap at the chance, but if convention attendee reaction was such that it was going to damage not only my reputation, but my fiscal ability to actually run the convention, then I'd probably have to drop him. Zainab Akhtar, please forgive my pronunciation if it's wrong, I've only ever seen your name written down. Owner of comic book publisher Shortbox, is herself a Muslim with fair objections to the obviously Islamophobic Miller's attendance, and contacted Thoughtbubble with her concerns, as did several other independent creators. According to Zainab, Thoughtbubble considered her an acceptable loss, and their lack of engagement indicated their preference to a big name over a lot of smaller ones. 8 weeks later, Shortbox withdrew their support from Thoughtbubble, who, it's worth pointing out, have already having financial difficulty due to the pandemic, and this loss, along with several other publishers pulling out and attendees getting ticket refunds, finally prompted them to remove Miller from their guest list. According to some tweets from Thoughtbubble, it's taken them this long to sort the issue out, possibly due to legal wranglings. Money somewhere's probably changed hands due in part to compensating Miller. That's just speculation on my part, but they've clearly had issues trying to sort this one out. But Thoughtbubble's biggest mistake was not their inclusion of Miller or their removal of Miller, but that it took 8 weeks for them to act and ignore the attendees' dismaying concerns over what they felt used to be a safe and inclusive environment, now invaded by one of the industry's perceived bigots, until it hit them in the wallet. Now, as I said, Thoughtbubble are a non-profit run organisation and they've had a hard time thanks to the pandemic, so I really don't blame them for thinking Miller might attract more bums in seats. But two things. Read the room. You have people who create comics from all walks of life, and I can guarantee most of them are a wonderfully diverse crowd of people. Miller's inclusion would be like throwing a moth-eaten cat in a pigeon coop. It would fight like hell, but eventually they would kill it. Just leave him alone as a byproduct of his time. Holy Terror was a long time ago, and nothing he's produced since has been worth a line of criticism. Have you seen Miller's hardcore fans? They are a collection of typical incel types that use all the traditional right-wing methods and terminology to justify their bigotry. And you want this crowd there? No, you don't. This situation has irrevocably damaged their reputation, trust, and their ability to run a convention. It has caused other creators to be more vocal about certain negative aspects of Thoughtbubble that may well be highlighted due to circumstances, but still go some way to continue the damage to that reputation. And as I mentioned, it's also gained the inevitable shitstorm from the fantard community, specifically Miller fans and followers of Comicsgate that claim Miller has been cancelled by SJWs. No, he hasn't. His removal is a business decision based on the reaction to potential damage to that business. Miller is a questionable person to include in what should be primarily a creative environment, not a potential hotspot for right-wing politics. Miller will do just fine without Thoughtbubble, and his apparent fans aren't going anywhere. that's hardly being cancelled. Miller himself has also been asked about. Not that convention goers are probably that bothered, but Miller himself over the years has tried to distance himself from his more objectionable opinions. If not going so far as to apologise, he has tried to make up in sentiment, if not in deed, for previous viewpoints. Not that it's gone far enough for his reputation to be repaired. It's quite clear that the comic fan community still consider Miller an objectionable figure. His work, specifically comics like Holy Terror and All-Star Batman, are abhorrent. His views on misogyny, homosexuality, Islam and the Occupy Wall Street movements have painted a very clear picture of a man who is intolerant of the kind of culture that Thoughtbubble seemingly exemplify. Thoughtbubble have released a statement, which is quite hard to find on their website, expressing their deep regret over the inactions, the admission that they haven't done enough, and the acknowledgement of their utter failure at supporting convention goers. And it has been signed by Team Thoughtbubble, indicating that this was a group effort to royally fuck up what was once a wonderful convention. As far as I can tell, there's been no indication on Miller's thoughts about the situation on any of his social media platforms. Maybe he just doesn't care. Whether Thoughtbubble's shame and regret is real or not is yet to be proved. Their reputation over the years since 2007 has been exemplary for the most part. This, as far as I can tell, is the only major blip on their record. It may well be that it took weeks of legal wrangling to get out of the Miller turning up at their convention. For all I know, they could have sat in the back room trying to draw the short straw over who got to tell him. Whatever the reason though, Thoughtbubble should have communicated with their attendees. And as I said, it's their silence that has caused the damage. Perhaps they need a better oversight committee and maybe start departmentalising a PR group and some marketing people, for example. I mean, just somebody who might sit down and go, this may have been a bad idea. It's not what Thoughtbubble did, it's the disappointment that I find so hard to accept. I've never been good with disappointment. When something disappoints me, I find it very hard to forgive. So when I have to assess the sincerity of Thoughtbubble's apology, I wonder whether they're actually going to make up for this really bad mistake. Thoughtbubble has got an awful lot of rebuilding to do when it comes to the trust between them and their attendees, and I wonder if they are up for the task. I do find myself hoping so. So yeah, I'm just finished editing this video, putting in all the flashcards and whatnot, and during the course of finding various screen grabs and so on, I noticed something quite interesting about Frank Miller. Frank Miller actually has a company, or rather, he has a company around him called Frank Miller Inc. His net worth is $25 million. And whilst compared to some that may not be a lot, it's certainly nothing to be sneezed at. And his Twitter is noticeably free from talking about Thoughtbubble and very much promoting things like his new Batman work for DC. And it was all about promoting Cursed, which was not only a comic that I don't think anybody noticed, and a Netflix TV show which has been cancelled after one season. It wasn't that bad, actually, to be fair. It was a bit all over the place, but it was watchable. Something about this is ringing alarm bells in my head. So I'm going to be doing a follow-up video to this, which is a decision I've only just made, hence the fact that I'm sat here in my jammies and dressing gown. A look that I may adopt for future videos. It is very comfortable. But yeah, this is interesting and worth digging into, and covers the other side of my geekiness, which is all about business. So yeah, it might be sinister, it might not be sinister, it might be completely innocent, it might be Frank Miller's attempts to make up for previous mistakes that he still hasn't apologised for, I'd just like to point out. Anyway, take care and have fun reading comics. Oh, and buy Shortbox. One of the upshots of this is a lot more people are buying Shortbox comics, and they do appear to be worthwhile. I myself will be partaking and doing some reviews. Again, take care and have fun reading comics.